Good evening and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Suddhāso and I'll be speaking this evening about another discourse of the Buddha. This is from the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 46, sutta number 6, the Kuṇḍaliyasutta. So I'll start with homage to the Buddha and I'll read through the discourse and give some explanations. And you're welcome to type in questions at any time and I'll answer them at the end. So I'm starting with homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So again, this is the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 46, sutta number 6, the Kuṇḍaliyasutta. So I'll be reading here from Bhante Suddhāso's translation and making a few comments about the Pali phrasing as we go along. So the discourse begins. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Sakyeta in the deer park at the Anjana wood. Then the wanderer Kuṇḍaliya went to the Buddha and exchanged greetings with him. First off, just a comment. When it refers to Kuṇḍaliya as a wanderer, the Pali word here is paribhajika. And the word paribhajika literally does mean one who wanders around, but that was understood to specifically mean a wandering contemplative, a wandering monk of some kind. So not necessarily a Buddhist monk, but just somebody who was a spiritual wanderer, contemplative wanderer, some kind of wandering monk with a spiritual practice of some sort. Buddhist monks, of course, are paribhajika in the sense that we are spiritual wanderers. But normally in the suttas, the word paribhajika is used to refer to non-Buddhist wandering monks, as is the case here. So Kuṇḍaliya is not a Buddhist at this point in the story. So he's a wandering monk of some non-Buddhist tradition. So it says, the wanderer Kuṇḍaliya went to the Buddha, exchanged greetings with him, and when the greetings and polite conversation were over, he sat down to one side and said to the Buddha, Sir Gautama, I like to hang around monasteries and visit assemblies. When I've finished breakfast, it's my habit to wander from monastery to monastery, from park to park. There I see some contemplatives and Brahmins speaking for the sake of winning debates and finding fault. But what benefit does Sir Gautama live for? So this is already a bit of an interesting start. So this person says that they like to go around visiting different monasteries, going to places where philosophers and contemplatives would have conversations, where they would have debates, where they would discuss spirituality and philosophy and religion. And this guy is saying that his observation is that a lot of these people, their practice seems to be about winning debates. It seems to be about getting really good at philosophical arguments, religious and spiritual arguments. So he's asking the Buddha, what's the purpose of your practice? So there's kind of the sense here already that Kuṇḍaliya is a little bit disenchanted or disappointed with the conduct of a lot of the contemplatives and philosophers that he's encountered. So again, this idea that these people are more focused on winning and debates and having successful arguments instead of doing something to purify their heart. So he asked the Buddha, what benefit does Sir Gautama live for? So what is the actual purpose of your contemplative life? What are you trying to do? And the Buddha replies, he says, the benefit the Tathagata lives for is the fruit of knowledge and freedom. So this is the Buddha's answer. And first off, noting that the Buddha here is talking about Tathagata in the third person. So often when the Buddha is talking about himself, he speaks in the third person. And often he simply says, the Tathagata does such and such. And this is important because it means, first of all, that the Buddha is not referring just to himself, but rather he's describing how Buddhas in general behave. So he's talking about how all the Buddhas of the past, present, and future act. not just about he himself as an individual, but rather what a Buddha as a set character in samsara does, how a Buddha as an archetype thinks and speaks and behaves. And so he's saying that a Tathagata, so a fully awakened being, a Tathagata lives for the sake of knowledge and liberation. So in Pali, this is vidya. Vidya means knowledge or understanding, and vimutti. So vimutti means liberation or freedom. Freedom from defilements, freedom from delusion, freedom from suffering. And this is called phala. So phala literally means fruit. And in the suttas, the word phala is often means the positive effects that come about from one's spiritual practice. And the word phala has a particular technical sense of meaning the 4 stages of awakening. Each of the 4 stages of awakening is called a phala, a fruit. So the first one is stream entry. So the fruit of stream entry means the attainment of the first stage of awakening. And then up to the fruit of arahantship, to be fully enlightened. And that's Vijjavamutti Phala. So the fruit of knowledge and liberation is referring to full awakening, the full enlightenment of an arhat. And so Kuṇḍaliya then asks the Buddha, Kuṇḍaliya says, what things must be developed and cultivated in order to fulfill knowledge and freedom? And the word that's translated here as things, by the way, is Dhamma. So what Dhammas must be developed and cultivated in order to fulfill knowledge and freedom? So Dhamma, of course, is a very broad word that can have many different meanings depending on context. And translating it simply as things is actually often the most accurate. So what things must be developed and cultivated in order to fulfill knowledge and freedom? But this could also be translated as what teachings must be fully brought into being, must be thoroughly done, completely and thoroughly and frequently done. So what teachings need to be applied thoroughly and completely in order to fulfill knowledge and freedom? And the Buddha replies, the 7 awakening factors. So Satta Bojjhanga, the 7 awakening factors, or the 7 factors of awakening, which also is very useful. So the list of the 7 Bojjhangas is one of the very useful lists that the Buddha gives that we can use as a guideline for our practice. 7 things that we want to work on cultivating. Sati is the first one. So sati, mindfulness. And Dhamma Vicaya, the second one, investigation of Dhamma, or an analysis of Dhamma, or analysis of things in accordance with Dhamma. The third one, Virya, means courage, resolve, determination. So cultivating the courage and resolve and determination to stick with our practice, to do what needs to be done. Piti, euphoria, joy, cultivating a joyful practice, a euphoric practice, taking pleasure in our practice. Passaddhi, tranquility, serenity, peaceful, serene, undisturbed attitude towards everything that happens. Samadhi, so mental unification, cultivating the collectedness and stillness and unification of mind through meditation practice. And upekkha, equanimity, non-reactivity, equipoise, balanced, non-reactive state of mind. So these are the 7 factors of awakening. And the Buddha says elsewhere in the suttas, he says that they're called bojjhanga because they lead to bodhi. So they're called bodhi anga, so awakening factors, because they lead to bodhi, to awakening. So if we cultivate these 7 factors, then we will attain awakening. Which is why he's saying here, when asked what we need to do in order to fulfill knowledge and freedom, the Buddha says you need to develop and cultivate the 7 awakening factors. And so then Kuṇḍaliya says, but what things must be developed and cultivated in order to fulfill the 7 awakening factors? And the Buddha replies, the 4 satipatthana. So the 4 establishments of mindfulness. So it's translated here as the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation, which I don't particularly like that translation. It's a little too creative. So in Pali, it simply says chattaro satipatthana. So the 4 satipatthana. So sati means, again, mindfulness, and upatthana means establishing, stabilizing. So this is how we these are the 4 ways that we establish and stabilize mindfulness, namely mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of mind, and mindfulness of mental phenomena. So these 4 areas or domains or ways of establishing mindfulness. So the Buddha here is saying, like, if we want to cultivate the 7 factors of awakening, then we need to first develop the 4 kinds of mindfulness, the 4 establishments of mindfulness. And Kuṇḍaliya says, what must be developed and cultivated in order to fulfill the 4 kinds of mindfulness, the 4 establishments of mindfulness? And the Buddha replies, the 3 kinds of good conduct. So this also is quite cute here. So this is very simple. It's saying, well, what's the basis for good meditation? What's the basis for good mindfulness? What's the basis for developing our mindfulness practice? Well, the basis is morality. This is the critical foundational piece for a good mindfulness practice, is we need to have good morality. So the 3 kinds of good conduct is good conduct by body, good conduct by speech, and good conduct by mind. So physical good conduct means helping others rather than harming them, practicing generosity rather than stinginess or theft, cultivating trustworthiness and respect in our relationships, so not abusing or taking advantage of others. So this is good conduct by body. Good conduct by speech means telling the truth, speaking gently, speaking in ways that helps to unify people, to bring people together, and speaking what is relevant and beneficial and connected with the Dhamma, rather than telling lies or using abusive speech or divisive speech or useless speech. Instead, we cultivate good verbal conduct in these 4 ways. And then the 3rd kind of good conduct is mental good conduct. So again, cultivating a mind of kindness and renunciation, rather than a mind of hostility or cruelty or acquisitiveness. And so then Kuṇḍaliya says, what must be developed and cultivated in order to fulfill the 3 kinds of good conduct? And the Buddha replies, sense restraint. So again, this also I find really cute. So it's like, well, what's the basis for morality? And the Buddha says sense restraint. And then the Buddha gives into a description of sense restraint. So the Buddha says, how is sense restraint developed and cultivated so as to fulfill the 3 kinds of good conduct? And he says, a monk sees an agreeable sight with their eye. They do not desire it or relish it, and they do not give rise to greed. Their mind and body are steady internally, well settled, and well liberated. And if they see a disagreeable sight, they are not dismayed. Their mind is not resistant, dejected, or full of aversion. Their mind and body are steady internally, well settled, and well freed. And then he applies the same thing to hearing a sound with the ear, an odor with the nose, a flavor with the tongue, touch contact with the body, or a mental object with the mind. In each case, if it's pleasant, then we do not cultivate desire or relishing towards it. So we don't obsess about it. But instead, we keep the mind steady, stable, non-reactive. And if it's something unpleasant, if we become aware of some disagreeable sensation, well, then we don't react with negativity. We don't react with resistance or dejection or irritation or aversion. So we don't get depressed or angry or hostile, but instead, again, we keep the mind equanimous, non-reactive, just accepting that this also is an expression of the nature of reality. And that to react with desire or aversion is simply something that disturbs our peace of mind. So with sense restraint established in this way, the Buddha says, when amongst mind and body are steady internally, well settled and well liberated when it comes to both agreeable and disagreeable sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and mental objects, this is how sense restraint is developed and cultivated so as to fulfill the three kinds of good conduct. So this is interesting in that this is one way that the Buddha talks about sense restraint, but it's actually not the most common way. The most common way that the Buddha talks about sense restraint is, he says, when seeing a sight with the eye, or hearing a sound with the ear, etc., do not fixate on its details and characteristics. Because when we fixate on details and characteristics, then harmful states might invade the mind. So that's the normal description of sense restraint the Buddha gives. And this is because normally, whenever we have a sensory experience, normally what we do is we identify the details that we really like, and we fixate on the details that we like. And fixating on those details, obsessing about those details, our desire and attachment increase. Or we fixate on the details that we hate, the details that we dislike. And as we fixate and obsess on the things we hate, then our aversion becomes stronger. So the Buddha's normal advice on sense restraint, although it's worded differently, it's actually the same basic idea. So the idea of not fixating on details and characteristics means don't fixate on the things that will increase your desire or increase your aversion, but instead keep the mind non-reactive, aware of everything, but not reacting with either desire or aversion. And the Buddha says that when one practices sense restraint in this way, then it's the basis for fulfilling the three kinds of good conduct. And then the three kinds of good conduct, he says, one gives up misconduct, physical, verbal, and mental misconduct, and one develops physical, verbal, and mental good conduct. So I described earlier what that is. And he says that this is how the three kinds of good conduct are developed and cultivated so as to fulfill the four kinds of establishing mindfulness. So again, in order to cultivate the three kinds of good conduct, then we need to be very alert and very aware of what we're doing with our body, very aware of what we're doing with our speech, very aware of what we're doing with our mind. And then that necessarily means that if we're trying to cultivate the three kinds of good conduct, then we will necessarily also be cultivating the four satipatthana, the four domains of mindfulness. And then the Buddha says, how are the four kinds of mindfulness developed and cultivated so as to fulfill the seven awakening factors? And then he gives the standard description of the four satipatthana. So a monk observes the body within the context of the body, or observes the body as it is. Ardent, aware, and mindful, without covetousness or displeasure towards the world. And then the same with feelings, with mind, and with mental objects. So with each of the four satipatthana, one is practicing with a mind that is dedicated, alert, clearly aware, but without desire or aversion regarding anything in the world. And he says this then leads to developing and fulfilling the seven awakening factors. So again, what are the seven awakening factors? Well, the first one is mindfulness. So of course, if we're cultivating the four establishments of mindfulness of body, feeling, mind, and mental phenomena, well, naturally, that's mindfulness. And investigation of Dhamma. So part of the description of how to do satipatthana practice also includes seeing the impermanence of every aspect of the four satipatthana. And also renunciation, dropping our attachment towards anything that appears, and also dropping, therefore, our self-identity in relationship to whatever appears. So in so doing, then one is cultivating the recognition of anicca and anatta, of impermanence and non-self. Therefore, also Dhammavicaya, investigation of Dhamma, is fulfilled through doing satipatthana practice. And of course, one needs to have dedication and courage and resolve in practicing satipatthana. The willingness to face whatever arises in body and mind without turning away. and the willingness to have full, clear awareness of our own experience. That takes courage, and it takes resolve. So that builds up the third awakening factor. And the fourth one is piti, which I like to translate as euphoria or ecstasy. So this rapturous joy, this delight, this euphoric delight in our practice. So the Buddha says that we should cultivate a euphoric mindfulness of the body, a joyful mindfulness of the body. So training ourselves in fully enjoying our body experience as we practice mindfulness of the body. So again, this then helps to build up the euphoria factor of awakening. And tranquility. So as we focus on the Satipatthana practices, as we focus on mindfulness of body and mind, then we're also allowing the mind to settle into stillness, which then leads to tranquility and also into samadhi. So the unification and stilling of mind in samadhi and meditative concentration. And of course, equanimity. So in observing the phenomena coming and going in our physical and mental experience, we're training to be clearly aware without reaction. So therefore, that's also developing the factor of equanimity. And so then the Buddha says, this is how the 7 awakening factors are developed and cultivated so as to fulfill knowledge and liberation. Oh, sorry. So he says that's how the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation are developed and cultivated to fulfill the 7 awakening factors. And then he says how the 7 awakening factors developed and cultivated so as to fulfill knowledge and freedom. And again, he gives the list of the 7 awakening factors, and he says that these rely on seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, and ripen as relinquishment. And he says this is how the 7 awakening factors are developed and cultivated so as to fulfill knowledge and freedom. So this is because as we cultivate the 7 factors of awakening, then we will naturally incline towards renunciation. We will naturally lose our passion, our obsession with the things of the world. We'll naturally lose our obsession with unreliable forms of happiness, which is everything other than awakening. And it will naturally lead then towards the diminishing and eventual cessation of our defilements. Just a comment here on the Pali. So the word viraga, it's translated here as fading away, but the word viraga literally means dispassion. So dispassion is the more common translation because it is in fact the more accurate translation. So raga means passion or lust, and the prefix vi means separate or without. So viraga means without lust, without passion. So the sequence here is that seclusion means we start losing interest in worldly matters. So we start withdrawing from our usual participation in mundane things, in ordinary pursuits. And from that, we then experience dispassion. Our passion and lust for worldly things starts to fade away. It starts to dissipate. And in so doing, then our defilements dissipate. Our desire and aversion melt away. And this is then what cultivates in renunciation of self-identity. And therefore to full knowledge and liberation, as the Buddha is saying here. And so then the sutta concludes, it says, when he said this, the wanderer Kuṇḍaliya said to the Buddha, "Excellent, Sir Gautama, excellent," as if he were writing the overturned or revealing the hidden, or pointing out the path to the lost, or lighting a lamp in the dark so people with clear eyes can see what's there. Sir Gautama has made the Dhamma clear in many ways. And Kuṇḍaliya says, I go for refuge to Sir Gautama, to the teaching, and to the Sangha of monks. From this day forth, may Sir Gautama remember me as a lay follower who's gone for refuge for life. So again, the sutta concludes with Kuṇḍaliya being quite impressed with the Buddha's teachings, with this beautiful, concise summary of the path to awakening, and Kuṇḍaliya deciding to follow the Buddha's teachings. So at this point, we can respect the sutta with 3 sadhus, and then I'll see if there's any questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And hello to the people joining in online. Hello to Joseph, Sean, Kumu, Kim, Bhumika, Gita, Mano, Maria, Gregory, Kevin, Vivian, Sud, Amaranta, Scott, and everyone else who's joining in. Good to see all of you. And I see a few questions here. Joseph says, I'd like to focus on the 7 unwholesome qualities to guard at the senses. 7 unwholesome qualities? Was there a list of 7 unwholesome qualities here? Joseph, I don't see a list of 7 unwholesome qualities in the sutta, so I think you might be talking about a different sutta. So he gives a list, Nabhijati nabhihangsati naragang namanku appatitya chitto adina manaso avyapana chetaso. What is that from the sutta? I see where you're getting that from. So he says, is it right to say that guarding against these 7 unwholesome qualities at the sense gates is the practice that cultivates sense restraint, the 3 right forms of conduct, and the 7 awakening factors? Yeah, I mean, that's basically the point the Buddha is making here with that section. Yeah, I would say that's a correct understanding. Yeah. And Joseph says, in the Assembly Sutta, the Buddha says that our harmonious assembly that appreciates one another with kindly eyes creates much merit. The hearts are liberated by mudita, which is a cause for joy. This concept of kindly eyes among other qualities that lead to mudita, how does this relate to sense restraint? Kind of doesn't. It's not like the cultivation of the Brahma Viharas is a great practice, but it doesn't really have anything to do with sense restraint as far as I'm aware, except in the general sense of not fixating on things that cause aversion. But otherwise, I don't actually see a strong relationship between the two. And Joe says, is the 5 ways to remove resentment taught by Venerable Sariputta an example of sense restraint? I mean, in the sense of not fixating on annoying traits of other people, then yeah, that's an example of sense restraint. One of the ways that we reduce our aversion towards other people is to not fixate on the things that annoy us about them. I mean, basically, you look at any person, and you can always find a list of things that are annoying. At least those of us who are hate types can do this very easily. So sense restraint in this case would be don't fixate on the things that annoy you. And in that case, then that will reduce the tendency towards aversion in the mind. Okay. Kumu says, is it possible to generate piti outside of meditation? For example, in our daily lives when living mindfully without getting attached or without showing aversion to various sensory stimuli? Yeah, I mean, whenever practicing mindfulness of the body, which should be every waking moment, you can cultivate euphoria, so an enjoyment of your body experience. So basically, every waking moment, you should be practicing mindfulness of the body anyway. So then, as the Buddha said, cultivate a joyful mindfulness of the body, cultivate a pleasant mindfulness of the body, cultivate mindfulness of the body accompanied by joy. So enjoy your body experience all the time, whatever you're doing. So that is a way to cultivate piti outside of meditation. Of course, it gets much stronger during meditation, but you can cultivate it outside of meditation as well, definitely. Sean says, in regards to sense restraint, what would be the most skillful way to navigate naturally pleasant sensations? For instance, if a cool breeze feels pleasant on the skin, should we acknowledge the pleasant sensation without clinging to it, knowing that it is impermanent? Yeah, that's about right. So the truth actually is that there's no such thing as naturally pleasant sensations. just as there's no such thing as naturally painful sensations. All sensations are actually inherently neutral. Pleasant and painful are extra things that we impart to the experiences. They're not inherent in the experiences themselves. So feeling a cool breeze on your skin, well, that might feel pleasant in the summertime, but in the middle of winter, that might be really painful. Or you might be someone who just doesn't like the feeling of a cool breeze on your skin, and therefore it's always painful. Or you might be someone who always likes it, but it's not inherent in the experience itself. Liking and disliking is something extra that we add to it. So in any case, the thing is to be clearly aware of the experience, but not cultivating desire or aversion towards it. Just aware of it as neutral data, not something inherently pleasant or inherently painful. And Joseph says, the 7 unwholesome qualities I listed, what are your thoughts on the etymology of the Pali? So let's see here. Nabhijati basically just means don't wish for it. Nabhihangsati means like don't hanker for it. So like don't, it's another word for hanker.
It's like you're desiring or really wanting something.
Yeah.
Hankering for a soup or whatever.
Yeah, so like fixating on it in your mind, obsessing about it in your mind. Naragang janeti just means don't produce passion for it, don't produce lust for it. Namaku means don't be bothered or annoyed or ashamed by something. So if something, and that's in reference to something that is, let me look at how that appears in the sutta. With a unpleasant thing. If something unpleasant happens, then again, not to be disturbed or bothered by it. And apatita chitta, where does that appear? Same thing. So this means not having a resistant mind. So not cultivating resistance of, normally when something unpleasant happens, it's kind of like, oh, I don't want this. I don't want this to happen. This shouldn't be happening. So not cultivating that kind of resistant stubbornness of mind. And adina manaso means, with a negative mind, a mind which is fixated on negativity. So when something unpleasant occurs, often we start going into negativity. Like, oh, my life is so awful. Why do bad things always happen to me? So that's translated here simply as dejected, but it more has the meaning of like thinking about the negative side. So adina meaning the drawback or the flaw, and manasa meaning mind. So a mind which is fixated on the negative. And abhyapana chetaso. Again, that would mean a mind which is full of vyapada, of aversion, of hostility. So it's, I think that's sufficiently clear. Randall says, how can I remain neutral when exposed to unpleasant states of mind, such as anger or depression? I do work as a social worker, thus I encounter people experiencing such states of mind. Well, the question is whether it's in your own mind or in somebody else's mind. If it's somebody else's mind, then, well, first off, equanimity about the fact that you cannot control somebody else's mind. So no matter how hard you try to fix the world, there will always be people who experience anger and depression because you cannot remove that from reality. So first off, equanimity. Second, equanimity because each person is experiencing their own karma. So why is that person experiencing anger and depression? Because of their own karma. If they want to be free from that anger and depression, then they need to cultivate new karma so that they can be free of it. And then within yourself, if you're noticing these tendencies appearing in your own mind, well, then investigate why. Investigate what you're doing to contribute to the arising of those harmful emotions, and work on countering them. So anger and depression are pretty directly countered through loving kindness meditation, and practicing generosity and charity, good things for others. And depression, recollect on your own good qualities. Recollect on the good qualities of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Recollect on the opportunity for awakening, and the fact that you're on the path to awakening. Recollect on your own virtues, the good things that you've done with your life, and the good things you continue to do, and the good things that you're planning to do. These are all things which tend to counteract depression. But for other people who are experiencing those things, well, look for ways to help them, but also recognizing that all your efforts might come to nothing, because ultimately the other person needs to choose to change their experience. So you can try to help other people, but if they don't want to be helped, then there's not really anything you can do. But you should still try, because that's an important part of compassion practice. And Richard says, on sense restraint, does it apply only towards sensory experience that generates desire and aversion, the first two hindrances, or does it apply to the other hindrances as well? Good question. It applies to all. So any sensory experience that promotes unwholesome tendencies of mind, we need to practice sense restraint. We don't want to be doing anything that cultivates any of the hindrances. So desire and aversion are singled out because they're the strongest, the most pervasive, and in many ways the most harmful. But we should also be attentive of sense contact that promotes the other hindrances as well. Joseph says, is this to be understood that it's not the sight, for example, that is unpleasant? It is these four unwholesome states? Are these sankhara or perceptions? So, as I mentioned before, sensory input itself is not inherently pleasant or painful. Sensory input is just data. It's just information. That's it. The reaction of liking and disliking is what creates the experience of pleasure and pain. So it is, in fact, our unwholesome reaction to sensation that makes it pleasant or unpleasant. So this actually is part of what's being investigated here. When we do sense restraint, we're investigating how, through reacting with desire and aversion, we are in fact destabilizing the mind. But that the sensations themselves are not inherently destabilizing. Sensations are just sensations. Buddha also has sensations, but a Buddha is not destabilized by them. Why are we destabilized by sensations? It's because of our own defilements, our own desire and aversion. So sense restraint is training ourselves to be aware of our sensations, but without destabilizing in any of the ways that the Buddha listed. So desire and aversion being the headers of the list, but the other items on the list are also equally relevant. So that's the last question. So I think we'll go ahead and conclude at this time. So we'll finish the session with 3 more sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you tomorrow evening for Mug Chat.